Hello and welcome back to UML Operator. In this episode, we're going to pick up where we left off in part 3 of building an MDG, an MDG technology. And in this episode, we're going to talk about distributing our MDG to our testers. We need to get them going so that we can get the governance and get approved for final distribution into a production environment for other stakeholders and modelers to use. So what else are we going to talk about? We're going to get into the various types of distribution strategies, folders, and we're going to even include reusable asset service, RAS, for those that have deployed a RAS instance in their shop, in their company. And we're going to try to talk about more about distribution before we get into the next episode, which is going to be post-distribution and more on versioning. But we'll talk about that when we get into this video. So let's get started. So in the past 2 episodes, we've talked about developing our MDE. We stepped through that and we did some testing. And I want to say unit testing, which is very important. We only tested in our environment. So I refer to my model development environment as an MDE, and I want to keep that separate from my code development environment, which is my IDE. So in summary, the MDE is where we develop the MDGs for unit testing. I only use this environment for unit testing. Other testing should be done in a separate and distinct environment we often refer to as the model testing environment, or MTE. So sorry for the acronyms. We use them quite a bit in technology. It just cuts out a lot of syllables when we're talking. As I stated in previous episodes, we should be developing our MDG in a clean environment so that there are no conflicts with other MDG technologies. So we don't want any conflict with the system technologies that are deployed with Sparx, or you have within your instance or system repository or installation of Sparx. In this particular case, we have a user technology. We'll talk more about this, where the MDG has been deployed. And we don't want any conflicts with this as we are developing and working on our MDG. We also do not want any other instances of Sparx open as we're developing for conflicts, caching issues, and so on between those instances. So when we're ready to distribute our MDG, we, of course, as you've learned in previous episodes, we generate the technology right here, and it creates an MTS XML file in your local storage area. And what we're going to be distributing is only the XML file. And there are multiple ways or places or strategies to use for distribution. The first one, and it's not in any particular order, is a network file share. And this is an instance where you share particular files, and we need to be focused on MDG when we're placing or distributing our XML file there for others to consume. Another one that's not recommended is FTP, File Transfer Protocol. I wouldn't recommend that, but I've seen that used in many companies for managing, sharing, and distributing files. Another one, again, not recommended, is email. You can zip up the file and you can distribute it via your messaging platform, whether that's email or some other transport. And I wouldn't do that for lots of different reasons. Number one is versioning, being able to maintain versions, because your file can change quite a bit, even in a day or an hour. And there's also security concerns in sending via email, especially outside the company. And then another method is reusable asset service. This is the best and most robust, method of distributing files or distributing any modeling assets in Sparx, but I realize not that everyone has Reusable Asset Service or RAS, R-A-S, available to them within their shop or their company. There are at least 4 distribution points for your MDG XML. One is local source, and another is a network file share, which we talked about a moment ago. And another is for the user technologies to the Windows app data folder for the user in their Windows environment. And then the last one is the system technology folder within Sparx installation, and that will show up as system technologies when we're looking at it. So in this particular case, we see MDGs, we see system technologies. This is everything that's deployed with my Sparx instance. And then we see user technologies. There's only one in here, and that's the MDG that we're distributing for testing, which includes everything within the XML, all of its references for the tooling. I like to develop my MDGs in my local development folder. When distributing for testing and eventually governance review, they can choose between a local deployment or to app data references. And I think that app data is the best place for testers to, at least at the user technology level, to test the MDG that you're deploying. The reason for this is that the testers should have all MDGs deployed in their environment. They may start with a clean environment, but before they finish, they're going to want to deploy to user technologies or system technologies to ensure that there are no conflicts or issues when testing the tooling. In this series, we developed a very simple MDG, but they can get very complicated, especially if they have a lot of external data, reference data, SQL XML, patterns, and so on. So that's the reason why they want to make sure they're in there, at least the app data folder, for concluding any testing and feedback back to the MDG developer. For the governance team and model administrator, they should start in the app data as a user technology prior to any move to system technology implementations. User technologies are provided to individual groups or users based on several factors. Number one is security. Number two is non-disclosure agreement work or projects that's taking place, NDAs, and there are other purposes. System technologies is for all users that have deployed. And so the Microsoft, if that's the operating system you're using, which we use, is their administrator has deployment tools for distributing any application or package. They're going to configure according to governance approval, whether it goes to system technology, all users, or to individual groups or users of that particular MDG tooling. I am not going to cover distributing technologies in this session. The admin is going to choose what they normally use, whether it's Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, MECM, there's also SCCM, there's Windows Server Update Service, WSS, which is used with SCCM for external control. And then in cloud, there's Microsoft Intune. So again, we're not going to cover that in this channel. However, they're distributing those files. Once governance approves, then they will use the tooling that's most suited for their company, shop, or experience. Almost everything is included within the XML that is generated during MDG generation. However, there could be external factors that are involved, such as large icon images. For larger icon sets or higher resolution images, some developers prefer to reference external files with the distribution. There's also help files and documentation, which we did not do in this series. I may do that later. And these large help content files, your .chms, your PDFs, it's easier to keep external references to the XML in your distribution. And if your MDG is commercial, you're going to have license management, which is going to be often an external file reference. Then there's release forms. Some shops and companies have release forms that need to be included in anything that is submitted to the governance team. This could be in the form of PDF, RTF, docx forms, and so on. Some shops that are a little bit more advanced have online forms. So I, as an MDG developer, would submit using that online reference to the governance team. And the XML file for the MDG would be an attachment that we would use within that distribution. Now, our scenario in this demonstration is a tester assigned to testing this solutioning MDG. So they have a blank Sparx instance. It's clean except for the technologies that are already installed. So here's all the system technologies. We don't start solutioning or MDG testing within the system technology folder. We use the user technology folder, and this has been put into the app data store. And you can get to that by right-clicking on this and locate technology, and it will bring up the app data where it's located, roaming Sparx systems in app data, EA MDG Technologies, and here it is right here. So the next thing they're going to do is they're going to go to the Start tab, and they're going to configure their perspectives, personal or shared, depending if you have multiple testers and your deployment, personal testing MDGs. And in here, they're including core UML technologies, core extensions, and common toolbox. Here is, because it shows up in the app data folder, it automatically places it within the resources available and is available to check if they want to use or test that particular instance or implementation of the MDG. So we're going to go ahead and save, and we're going to go, it closes, and we're ready to start testing. Here's another instance where the tester has brought in the requirements. They have brought in their testing suite, so they're able to look at the test cases that are typically available to them. And let me move this over below. Let me put it underneath the workspace instead. So when I have this open and I select the test case that they're going to be stepping through, they're going through the various tests that have been assigned to them. You can see they're not been run yet, and they're going to run their tests. And if we Alt-G on this, when they built out the strategy for the testing, they've included activity diagrams that are stepping them through how they should perform the test. And they have other things that are available to them for testing the review. So they actually have the test cases themselves that are available to them. So these would be the test runs that they would do, the scripting they would using to run all of the tests that are necessary. So they're going to come in the upper right here. They're going to set their perspective to testing MDG. So this would be their perspective. I don't have any model patterns in this implementation. We may do that later, but Solution Tools is available and the solution diagram is available. They're in the package they're going to go to. You can tell right here the package they're going into, the diagram name. We're going to go ahead and leave that, and we're going to go ahead and create. Then what we're going to do in our hamburger menu here is choose our solution tooling, and we're going to start testing. So we're going to bring in a class element. We'll bring in another class element and we'll test that it's naming them correctly. We'll test if you go over, let's bring properties over here. I'm going to put it right to the right over here. And let's bring in a microservice. Shape script works. Let's bring in a connector. So an association here, that connector works. Let's bring in another connector right here and bring that in. So they're testing that works. Let's bring in a dependency and I'm going to move associations over for this dependency check here. And we're going to run a dependency. That's working. Something like that, something like that. Maybe move the names up so they're readable. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And then let's look at the tag value. So when we select an element, these are all the tag values that need to be included. Tells them to enter in an app ID. Let's put 1406. In here is the asset ID. Let's do the same thing here. We'll just call this one 1407. There we go. And we can impact type. We can say, hey, this is enhancing. This one, impact type, is enhancing. We're going to go ahead and leave that. And the microservice is new, impact type new. There we go. How about the tag values for the connector? The impact type, it's using the same enumeration, same tag values. This is going to be enhance actually. So we're going to change this to enhance. And the use from this to this one is going to be new. So I'm going to use the tooling here till I build out the help assistance. So we'll select that again, get the hand. There we go. And this one is the impact type is going to be new because this is a new system that is using this new microservice that's available. Now, we don't see the tag values here. So as you've learned in the channel, you can do it in individual compartments. Compartment visibility, let's turn on tags. And there we see the tag values. So we see that there's several where we still need to make a selection. And then we want to do them for every element in the diagram. You've learned how to do this in the channel. Bring up properties, go to elements, and turn on tags. And there we go. Now we have these showing in here. Zoom out a little bit here. But we don't see, because of the shape script, the tag values during this test run. And we've all learned how to expose that. Go to appearance, go to enable info view. We're going to go back to appearance again, info view properties, and we want to see tag values in here, right? So we have the shape script in here and everything available. So this test looks successful at this point. As for regression testing, the tester may bring in external reference data if it's not included in the package, but used by the rest of the team. Let's bring in a legend to look for coloring of the tag values, and everything seems to be working. Let's take an association. The impact type is enhanced. Let's change it to new. That's working. Let's take this element here, this microservice. Its impact type is new. Let's change it to enhance. That's working. It picked up the blue in the shape. The info view element itself is not affected unless you program it accordingly. We didn't. Let's change this one here to impact type new. And all the coloring is working as far as that goes. All right, that's going to conclude this episode. In our next part, we will get into post distribution. We had a tester come through and run through all their test cases. We had a fail during acceptance testing. We need to find out more about that. And there should be notes within that particular test element. There were deferred efforts that are in here. So when we get it back, we'll look at the notes, the result notes that are there for that. They put in some CRs in here, change requests, and they have the various regression scripts that they needed to run through. They understood what those were and more. So this is going to come back to us. Here's the form that came back. This was SA10 version 02. All of the details, we want to make sure that we keep those the same when we redistribute this, but we'll get into that when we get into what happens post-distribution, because as you're going out into your environments, you're using user technology prior to governance approval, which may leave it in user technology or move it to system technology for all modelers to use. And that decision would be made by the governance. We can certainly make our recommendations, but security, legal, and governance should review your MDGs to ensure that you're not pushing things into your modeling environment that could impact your shop or your company or your clients, your customers. So that's going to be it. Thanks very much for watching. Leave your questions and concerns down below. Let me know what challenges you have if you even are developing your own model-driven generated technologies, MDGs, and we'll try to cover it in the channel. So look forward to the next episode. Until then, happy modeling.